Theodore. He's a tugboat and a friendly tugboat too. A friendly tugboat too. Oh, Theodore likes to do the things that friendly tugboats do. Pushing and a pulling in the great big harbor, in the great big world is so much fun. So many brand new things to discover. Waking with the sun, gotta get the job done. Oh, Theodore and Emily, Theodore, Hank and George, and the harbor master too.
Emily and Theodore were gazing out into the harbor when Hank and Theodore floated up. "What are you looking at?" asked Theodore. "We're watching George," said Theodore. "I see him," said Hank. "He's moving Bobby Barge." George was in fact buttoned onto a very heavily loaded Bobby Barge and was slowly pulling him toward the dock. Theodore and Hank could see George was straining under the weight. "He looks ready to blow a gasket," said Hank. "I'll give him some help," said Theodore, and he started after George. "No," said Theodore. "Don't help him." "George has to pull it by himself," said Emily. "It's part of the contest," said Theodore. How did I do?" asked George. "Even better than yesterday, George," said Theodore. "I don't think another tug anywhere will do better."
Okay then, this is starting off quite nicely. George is practically Rocky-style training for whatever it is he's doing. What the heck is he even pulling anyway? I mean, look at his face. No wonder he's straining so much. What is this all for? Well, as it turns out, George is competing in a contest called Tugboat of the Year. Yeah, love how they mentioned this all of a sudden.
Now, every tug knows about the famous trophy given out each year to the best tugboat anywhere. The Tug of the Year. None of our tugs here in the Big Harbor had ever won it. "Part of the contest is to see how much weight a tug can pull," explained Theodore. "Tugboat of the Year," said Theodore in amazement. "Do you really think you can win, George?" said Hank. "I calculate his chances are very good," said Theodore. "He can't lose," said Emily. "Well, I think you deserve to win the trophy, George," said the dispatcher. "Well, yes," said George, and then added in a louder voice, "Yes, I do deserve it."
Okay, some things don't make sense to me. I can definitely see Theodore not knowing about this competition, but Hank? How is that even possible? When he was here for how long until Theodore arrived? Surely he should know a bit about it. And why is it only George representing the harbor? Aren't Theodore and Emily qualified enough for this? And you only mentioned one part of the contest. Are you not gonna tell us the rest? I'm even surprised that none of them have even won by this point. I mean, really, what tugs are better than our beloved Big Harbor tugs?
I can think of some.
Don't you dare say what I think you're about to say. Alright, all jokes aside. So the days go by, and the tugs were already treating George as if he already won. Finally, the big day comes, and the dispatcher is ready to announce the winner. Fingers crossed for you, George.
"I have the name of this year's Tugboat of the Year." George took up a position facing the other tugs. The dispatcher continued. "And the winner is Molly the Vehement. First, I would like to thank all my friends," began George, but then he stopped. See, the name had finally sunk in. "Molly the Vehement?" he said quietly. "I'm sorry, George," said the dispatcher, "but you didn't win this year." It seemed to the other tugs that George grew a bit smaller at that moment. I'm not Tugboat of the Year," he said softly. "But he did very well in all the parts of the contest," said Theodore. "Well, Molly did just a little bit better," said the dispatcher quietly. "It's not fair," said Hank. No, said George. "I've been to the harbor all the way across the ocean where Molly works. She deserves to be the Tugboat of the Year. I guess I don't."
Youch. That definitely stings a little. Who the f is this Molly the Vehement? I want to talk to her.
Easy, David. But yeah, I'll admit I do feel really bad for George. All that hard work and training for nothing? That bites.
Yeah, but if Molly did do better than George, what were the other parts of the contest? Plus, am I the only one who thinks it's a bit weird that George is the only one who knows about Molly? Whatever. Well, poor George wanted to be alone for a while, and the other tugs were left carrying on without him. But when he returned later that day, he began acting differently.
You should have won the contest, said Theodore, trying to make George feel better. Well, I guess I'm not as strong as I thought, said George. It was silly of me to think I could win that trophy. I'm glad you're back, George, said Emily. But George didn't seem to hear. He didn't even seem to notice the other tugs watching him. I need a tugboat to work with Bobby Barge at the oil refinery this afternoon, said the dispatcher. None of the tugs spoke. No one liked working at the oil refinery. It was a dirty job. Oh, I'll do it, I guess, said George, sounding very sad. That's not like George at all, said Emily. It's like he doesn't care anymore, said Theodore.
Wow. Either this is really petty behavior over an old trophy, or this just totally broke George's confidence. If he is that depressed to where he doesn't care about what he does, then not only is that a big mood, but the most relatable moment with George. Most of us have probably been at a point like that in our lives, and it is very difficult to go through. Well, with that being said, let's catch up with old George and Bobby at the oil refinery.
Thanks for helping me out with these oil barrels, George, said Bobby. George only grunted. Bobby wasn't sure if George had heard him. Is your engine all right, George? Called Bobby a little louder. Sure it is, said George. Why? It's just that you're going so much slower than you did when you pulled me for the contest, said Bobby. I guess I'm just not as fast now as I was then, said George. Oh, whatever you say, George, said Bobby. Then after a moment he added, oh, we can finish moving these barrels tomorrow if you can't do it all today. Well, George was still feeling hurt about losing the trophy. But now he was starting to feel even more upset. After all, he'd never left a job without finishing it. Sure, I can move all those barrels today, he said. Hang on, Bobby. Now, they started to move much faster than before. Bobby smiled to himself as he felt the water rushing beneath him, and when he looked up, George was smiling too.
Again, George is being very relatable here. Lack of confidence can definitely have that effect on you. At least he finally snapped out of it.
George, I'm really sorry you didn't win the contest, said Bobby. Well, I was too, said George. But you know, all this time we've been moving barrels, I haven't thought about the trophy at all. I really enjoy working with you, George, said Bobby. Well, I really like working with you too, said George. Tough tugging is better than getting some silly little trophy anyway.
Hey, there's the George we know. No need to be mopey over a trophy. Like you said, tough tugging is better. Easy to say I think George's confidence is back. Which was a good thing since after this job, Emily and Foduck needed his help docking a ship. When they returned to the dock, something very surprising was about to happen.
This evening I have a special presentation to make. Yes, the most valuable tug in the Big Harbour Award, said Emily. It's for a tug who's always ready to help, started Foduck. And friendly and strong, called Theodore and Hank, who were approaching the dock with Bobby Barge. Yes, very, very strong, added Bobby. And the winner is, said the dispatcher, George the Valiant. Me? Said George in surprise. Yes, you, said Theodore, moving closer to George. Hank and I made a special trophy just for you, and it's from all of us. George, said Emily, we wanted you to know that you're always a very valuable tugboat to us. The most valuable, called Hank. Thanks, said George. And there, hanging around his stack, was a special award that Theodore and Hank had made. George could feel himself smiling inside and out. That special award you made was a good idea, Theodore, whispered the dispatcher. This is a wonderful award, said George. But I think for me, the most valuable thing is having such good friends.
And that concludes Tugboat of the Year. Alright, David, your thoughts.
Overall, this episode was fantastic. It really relates to a whole lot of people, especially considering the lesson it teaches. When you find out something that gives you a lack of confidence, not thinking about it, it helps so much. And being a depressant myself, I know the struggles of having no confidence. But after watching this episode, it actually hits very close to home. The sets were great, the music was great. Everything about this episode just feels good to me. And I can definitely say this is one of George's best episodes.
I gotta say, I'm pretty shocked that this is the second relatable episode with George. First one being True Blue Friends, if some of you remember. Now we have him here battling a state of depression and total lack of confidence after losing the contest. As I've mentioned before, I'm sure there are a lot of us that have dealt with something similar to what George goes through here. I will admit that some of the story was a tad off in some parts, but other than that, I still thought it was pretty okay. There were no new characters to really focus on, apart from Bobby, who, yes, has already appeared, but this was the first and only time he's spoken this season. The music once again was nothing to brag about, and for visuals, our key points were pretty much the Great Ocean Dock and the oil refinery. I too struggle with a lack of confidence, and I have battled depression, so not only do I personally relate to George in this one, but I feel like this is definitely one of his best. Next up is Theodore the Jokester.